All right, I think we're live. We have not done one of these for a while. This is a subject to hybrid deal, which means that there is a first piece of the debt where you are buying a project property subject to the existing financing. So you're taking over the payments on these underlying loans in the situation, and you're combining it with a seller financing piece, which means that the seller is also going to become the bank for the equity portion. So typically why a seller would do this is because they want to sell the property at a higher price than they would be able to achieve had they just sold it on the market where someone might be getting a more expensive interest rate, right? So in this scenario, you can see that there's a primary loan at 5.87%, and then the seller is financing the rest at 3% interest rate. And you can see that this is the total PITI breakdown, including the 728. And you can see that this is the existing loan for 318, and the seller is carrying 172 grand with a balloon payment in 10 years. So everything is due to the seller in 10 years. So we're going to go through the exercise and talk through how do you punch this in the calculator. At first glance, I can probably tell it's not a deal because I can see that the total monthly payment is $4 grand, and even the wholesaler who's advertising the deal is at $23.80. So that's a very, very negative cash flow deal. But let's go through the exercise so we can punch in the mechanics of how you actually apply a subject to hybrid deal. All right. So this property, let's go ahead and look at this right here. 525 grand, 525, 000. The renovations, I'm going to leave that alone for now because we already know it's not going to be a cash flow deal. So that cash and cash return number is not really going to matter. For our rent, we're going to look up this property on Redfin, and this property is in what county? I'll need to get the fair market rent, and this is in Travis County, 78641. So I'm going to Google HUD FMR, and I'm going to click on the first link at the very top. And from there, I'm going to go and click on access to small area FMRs. I'm going to look up the FY 2025 FMR, small area FMRs. And I'm going to have a Texas and Travis. Boom. And this is in 78641. 78641. The rent ceiling here is 3340. 3340, and then 3 has 2880, 280, 78641, 78641. All right. The 3-bed, just writing down these numbers because my partners already know how to analyze these deals. So this is the fastest way for me to get them some data points so that they can look up the analysis. All right. Then I'm going to put in my address here on Leander, and when you go to affordablehousing.com and you go to the owner section and you go to the market rent estimate, plug in the address, you plug in bedroom count. Well, all of a sudden, let's see what we get. You can see that the average rent for 25 units within a 0.5 mile radius is 2361. 2361. And that's the radius. I mean, that's the number you really want to use this for. This is 0.5. Zip is 2386, 2380, 2386. So it's pretty much all around this $2,300 number, which is consistent, I believe, with what was disclosed by the wholesaler. 2380, 2361. Yeah. So the problem is if you look at the FMR, the fair market rents, and you assume that your rent is 3340, you will be overestimating your rental projections by $1,000 because you got to use the more reasonable rent. And this rent probably includes some utilities. And if you don't cover utilities, you got to deduct that anyways. Now, the reason you got to use the lower of the two is because of the rent reasonableness test. For those of you that have not seen it, if you look up the Housing Choice Voucher Program Guidebook, Housing Choice Voucher is what they previously were known as Section 8, but they rebranded it because of all the negative connotations associated with it. Well, at Section 2.2, for comparability, you got the size and the unit type. And obviously that matters, but typically you don't see 4-bedroom apartments getting built. So you can pretty confident that these 25 units are single family homes. So that's why you got to use 2361 as the more reasonable rent in this situation. Okay. Now let's plug in the rest of the details here. All right. This property for 2 entry fee, 33 grand. What is the entry fee made up of? 23,180. So the seller is going to get 23,180 right here in E19, $10,000 assignment fee. That's going to be going right here in E21. And now closing cost is going to be 2.5%. $318,912, 5.87% right here from the mortgage loan information. 8/1/52 is the maturity date, so I'm going to do 8/1/22 in the start date. And then the seller carry portions would be 172. So I'm going to go to the second loan, 172,908, 3% interest rate, 30-year amortization, and the balloon is going to be 10 years right here. So that all adds up over here to the payments. And now, the reason I don't need the payments or the dates to be exactly correct is because all I care about here is the cash flow. So if I can take the total monthly payment that's disclosed to me of $3,997, I'm going to go to B28 equals 3,997. And I'm going to subtract the principal portion of the subject to loan, the interest portion of the subject to loan, the principal portion and interest portion of the seller financing note. And that backs into how much I'm paying for interest and property taxes and insurance on this property, insurance and property taxes. That's prime as well. I'll probably add an extra $30 for insurance because I'm turning this into investment property. So I want to be pretty accurate about my increase in insurance costs because they typically view a investment property as more risky when compared to a primary residence property. So that's going to be very important. So I got 10% set aside for my maintenance. So for my big replacements, just my roof repairs, et cetera, I'm setting that aside because that money doesn't belong to me. I got 10% for my property management, and I got 5% for my vacancy expenses. So that leaves me a total of negative. If you rent this property out for 2, 3, 6, 1, you'll be negative 22.56 cash flow a month. And that means that's a negative 54% return. And I didn't even look at the condition of the home. Let's see if it's relatively turnkey. Yeah, it's pretty much turnkey. So $35 rehab is probably good, just enough to kind of clean things up, but this looks vacant and it's just not a deal, right? Again, this is not investment advice. We're not soliciting any investments on this call, just showing you how to work. I do every single day to be objective, but also just put in the reps. Today, all we did was learn how to mechanically and tactically put in the numbers for a subject to loan and a seller financing note. All right. Now, this might not be a deal for you. Doesn't mean it's not a deal for somebody else, right? If someone says, hey, I can buy a $500,000 home for only roughly, let's call this what, $50,000. I mean, that's a 10% down payment. That might be a better deal to somebody because they're getting a really good interest rate if they're living there as a primary residence. So a deal is a very subjective term to everybody. And that's why you got to figure out what your criteria is. If you've been looking at our past lives over the past couple of days where we analyze the deal every single day, you can kind of see how we can play around the terms. This creative finance deal has already have all the terms negotiated because that's what the seller signed. So you're not really playing with too many more levers. Could you adjust an up downward to assignment fee? Maybe, right? That's a negotiation with the wholesaler. Might your rehab be a little bit higher? Yeah, that could possibly happen. And so these are all the items that you want to be really, really careful of and take into account. So if you guys want to copy the spreadsheet, go to affordablehousing.io, click on the Get Deal Analysis tool, put in your name, your email, your phone number, and that's the fastest way for you to get a copy of the spreadsheet. And I hope you copy my homework, right? Put it on your own YouTube channel, put it on your own spreadsheet. And I think that's the best way for you to go about it. Get in the reps. I hope you all have an amazing Wednesday. I'll be back here again tomorrow for day 362. Have a good one, everybody.